From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Welcome to the Books and Beyond program for young people, sponsored by the Center for the Book and the Young Reader Center. I'm Karen Jaffe, head of the Young Reader Center, and I'd like to start by welcoming our very important guests, students from the District of Columbia. And when I say your school, please raise your hands. Friendship Collegiate Academy Public Charter School, Cesar Chavez Public Charter School for Public Policy, Thurgood Marshall Academy, Gonzaga College High School, Stewart Hobson Middle School, and Washington School for Girls. Let's everybody give a hand. Yay. I'd like also to take a moment to thank Kathy Weinberg, a consultant to the Young Reader Center, for the second year of our Teen Board program. The idea of this event essentially came from Kathy and my very able assistant to the YRC, Kaheen Muhammad. We're pleased to have representatives from two of our Teen Board schools, Cesar Chavez and Stewart Hobson. We also want to thank the rest of our staff and volunteers without whom we could not have produced this event. So please, if you're with the YRC, raise your hand so everybody could see you. And we want to thank the publishers of All American Boys, Simon & Schuster, for sending the authors, Jason, Reynolds, and Brendan Kiely. Both Jason and Brendan are established writers of teen literature. I'm not going to steal their own description of the collaboration they produced, except to say that this book about race and police brutality was inspired by many true and recent events in too many cities around our country. And since this event is being held in a library, I want to take the liberty, in deference to the teachers and librarians in the room, to reference an important Black author by the name of Ralph Ellison, whose short story, Battle Royal, which became the first chapter in his very famous book from 1952, The Invisible Man, was included in the storyline of All American Boys. So when you get back to the classroom, or even home or in the library, after reading Jason and Brendan's book, you might want to check out The Invisible Man as well. Two important housekeeping items. This program is being videotaped. You will have a chance to ask questions later, and the authors will explain how that will work. Essentially, what's going to happen is you have cards in front of you and pencils. As the program goes along, you might think of a question, jot it down. You have two options. You can put it in a basket that will be passed around to pick up the questions before we start. And you also have an option of raising your hand and speaking directly into the mic. So you can decide when that time comes, which will be at the end of the program. When the program is over, I know we haven't started yet, but please remember, I will call the schools as you exit. Not everyone will get up and walk out at the same time. That's impossible. So I will call the school and you will exit when I call you. And lastly, there are some schools that have not picked up your books. They are at the table right outside here where the public book signing is taking place. So educators, if you've ordered a bag of books, please pick them up after the program. And now it is my honor to introduce Jason and Brendan. Thank you.
So, with that, y'all good? Everybody good? Yeah. All right. So, here's the thing. I'm Here's the thing. My name is Jason, and to explain sort of what brought me to this book, what brought me to this book, I'm going to tell you a quick story. 1998. All right. So how old are y'all? Some of y'all, were any of y'all born? All right. So none of y'all were born. None of y'all were born. None of y'all were born. But anyway, I was born. I was alive. You know. 1998, right? Here's the deal. Me and my homies, it's like 4 of us in the car. There was a car back in the day called a Nissan Stanza. None of y'all know what it is because they don't make them anymore. You know what's a Nissan Stanza? What it look like? It's like a little car. It's sort of like a car. It's like a car. The Nissan Stanza was basically like this strange little car that they made back in the day, but it was also sort of like a van. It's sort of like a truck. It was like a weird little vehicle, right? And it had a sliding door on one side, but it was only like this. It was a tiny little car with a sliding door, right? Very strange. 4 of us are in the car. We riding down 23rd Parkway. Y'all know what 23rd Parkway is? Iverson Mall, around there, right? All right, so I'm from here. I'm from your neighborhood. I'm from Wheeler Road, right? So we ride, right? All right, so we riding down 23rd Parkway. It's the middle of the day. I'm thinking like maybe 3:30. The music is blasting. We playing something crazy. You know, I can't think of what the song was now, but it's like the equivalent of like in today's time, which I would be playing. It's like I don't know, Drake and Future or whatever. Like something just wow, right? We blasting it. And we get to a yellow light. The light turns yellow as we're approaching it. And my homie who's driving drives through the yellow light, right? And makes the left turn. Technically, he didn't break no laws, right? He makes the left turn. We see the sirens, right? Whoop whoop. Now, everybody in my neighborhood already knows what time it is. Right? We were all raised to believe, like, listen, if you ever get pulled over by the cops, yes sir, no sir, hands up, right? My hands on the wheel. Everybody doing what they're supposed to do. The cop walks over to the car. Remember, there's 4 of us in the car. He walks over to the car and he says, look, let me get your license and registration. My buddy is like, yo, why are we being pulled over? The cop is like, well, you ran a red light. My man is like, it wasn't a red light. The light was yellow. He's like, doesn't matter. Give me your license and registration. My friend can't find the registration to his car. Now, remember, there's 4 of us. So there's 2 people in the front. There's 2 people in the back. Now, the guy in the back seat behind the passenger side is one of your homies who's like kind of stupid, right? He's like, you know how everybody has the one friend you're like, dog, like it's like that guy, right? Right. You all know this guy, right? So look. So here's what happens, right? So we turn around to our homie, we say, listen, check behind the seat, in the pocket behind the seat, and see if the registration's there. If it is, don't open the door. Just pass it to me, and I'll pass it to the cop. The cop has walked back to his vehicle at this point to run the sort of license and do all this, that, and the third, and giving us time to find the registration. So we're all digging through the car. Finally, the dumb one, right? He reaches in the back pocket, he pulls it out, he's like, yo, I found the registration. Remember, it's a sliding door. This car has a sliding door. Now, I don't know, minivans are really quiet these days, right? But like back in the day, when you opened the sliding door, it was like hearing the lions roar, right? You open the door and it was so much noise. So he opens the door, and literally a second into opening the door, the cop is like with his gun out, like gun in the car, in our faces. Now, here's the thing. Let's be clear. I'm not necessarily upset about the fact that the cop drew his gun because my homeboy opened the door, and that was a ridiculous thing to do, and so the cop obviously went on the defense. But what happens next is ridiculous. True story. What happens after my friend opens the door, the cop tells him to close the door after we're all scared to death because the gun is in our faces. We sit in the car for 5 more minutes, and next thing you know, there are 4 cops, right? 4 cop cars pulling up behind us. They all come over to us. They say, do you have any guns? Do you have any drugs? We say, no, we're coming from high school. We're coming from our school. We have no guns. We have no drugs. This is our neighborhood. We're just trying to get home. We've done nothing but run a yellow light. The officers say, I don't believe you. Everybody out the car. 5 minutes later, we're all out. 4 of us are all out of the car. We're face down. We're handcuffed. And they tear his car apart. I'm talking like everything. Tear the seats out, looking for something that's not there, right? They take everything out of his glove compartment. They look under everything. They empty out his trunk, put everything on the street. They pull everything out of the car and put it all on the street while we lay there on our stomachs in our neighborhood with our friends walking by like, yo, what? Like, what's good? What's happening? This, that, and the third. And finally, after like 10 minutes of this, 20 minutes of this, they don't find anything, of course, because we're innocent. They uncuff us and tell us to be on our way, leaving all of our stuff on the street. They all get back in their cars and they drive away, right? True story. It shook me because it was the first time that I realized, like, oh man, it's real out here. My older brother had gone through it. A lot of my other friends had gone through it, but it was the first time that and it could have been much worse, right? Like, anything could have happened. Some of it's my homeboy's fault for opening the door, right? But the rest of it was totally unnecessary. We hadn't done anything but run a yellow light, right? I've got other friends who've had their teeth kicked out. I have tons of stories, some of which I'll share with you guys at another point. But that's what brought me to this book. That was sort of my own interaction as a young person in this neighborhood, from D.C. as a young person, and my experiences with the police officers when I was your age. And so when I sat down to write this book, that's sort of what I was bringing to the table. Right? I remember what it felt like. I remember what it was like to have your parents. How many of y'all had to talk with your parents about what to do if you ever have an interaction with the cops? You know what I mean? And most of y'all ain't. Some of y'all in high school, some of y'all aren't. It's a lot of people. It's a young age to have that talk. And I was around your age when my mom gave me that talk.
So I'm Brendan Kiely, and you can remember the pronunciation of my last name in the corny way because it's Kiely like Smiley. And I come to this book with a different angle. I'm from Boston, and don't hold it against me. And I, too, have two ways into this. I, too, had interactions with the police when I was in high school. I, too, drove a car, actually a minivan, with a loud door. It was maroon. It was a Chrysler. I, too, drove around with a bunch of friends, goofing around. But I feel a moment of pain as I begin to share how different my story is. And I had two incidents. But the one that I want to share is one where I did something wrong. I was speeding 30 miles over the speed limit. That's insane, right?
In a minivan.
In a minivan. It's insane. Don't do it. Don't do it. And I got pulled over in my minivan with a minivan full of friends. And I, too, didn't know where my registration was. I knew what my license was. I didn't even know what a registration was. And my friend, Adam, in the front seat next to me, was basically saying, it's in the glove compartment or somewhere. Like, you should know this. You drive. Finally, we found it. Gave it to the cop. The cop asked me to step out of the car. So I got out of the car. The cop did give me the third degree. Where's the marijuana? Where's the marijuana? Blah, blah, blah. Didn't have any of that. That wasn't a part of the process. And I explained, oh, I'm nervous. I'm just driving kids home. We were supposed to go for ice cream, but that didn't work out. And the mini golf place was closed. And, oh, my God, I'm just so scared. And the cop said, look, I'm going to let you go with a warning. Right? No, that's the right thing to say. What? It's crazy. It's crazy. And so I want to come to this project, All American Boys. I want to come to this project being really honest about those two differences, right? I think it's important for us to think about this as a piece of literature, to think about the characters involved in this book. Jason wrote Rashad's narrative. I wrote Quinn's narrative. There are two narratives. There are two kids living side by side in the same city. And their lives are so different. And I wanted to come to this project because I want that to be a conversation that we're all having, an honest conversation that we're all having, and a conversation that we can start having in our classrooms, and hopefully we can start having some larger conversations out there in the rest of the world as well. Because I also worked as a high school teacher for a number of years. So I recently have stopped teaching. I hope to go back because I really miss it. And as I looked around my classroom, I see all these kids, and I taught kids from all over New York City. I've lived in New York City for the past 15 years. So I taught kids from all around the city. And it was really difficult to think about how these kids in the same classroom are having such different experiences. And so I come to this project wanting us to really have an honest conversation about those different experiences. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Yeah. So let me clarify, because I am still a type A teacher. You do have those note cards. You do have those note cards. We do want to make sure that we have a lot of time for questions, right? And if anyone feels brave and just wants to speak into a microphone and ask a question, great. But if you feel like you have a question that you don't want to say out loud, but you still want to have us answer, that's what the cards are for. So you make sure you write that down, get it into the basket as it gets passed up, and we'll try to make sure we address it, okay?
I know one of the things that a lot of people always want to know is how do we write the book, right? How did this happen? Why did the two of us decide to sit down and do this, right? It's a question that comes up pretty often. It's something that we always like to talk about because it's important. So here's the deal. You guys remember Trayvon Martin? You guys remember what happened with Trayvon Martin, right? So when Trayvon Martin happened, the two of us were on tour. This is a little while ago. We were on tour for other books that we were traveling the country talking about. And then Trayvon happened. And at first, listen, here's the truth. I had just met this dude, right? And coming from where I come from, it took a minute for me to trust him, because I wasn't used to sort of having someone close to me that wasn't black, that wasn't from my neighborhood, that didn't know my family, that didn't know my way or my environment, understand or even want to talk about any of the experiences that I had as a young person. Any of the drama that we see sometimes if you're growing up in Anacostia, if you're growing up in Simple City, if you're growing up in the farms, right? Like if you're growing up in any of those neighborhoods, right? So it was tricky for me at first, because it was like, dude, you're not even going to understand the way I feel when it comes to Trayvon Martin, right? The way my mom feels, right? My mother called me crying when Trayvon's verdict, when the verdict happened and George Zimmerman walked and was found innocent. My mother called me crying because she felt like, that could be my kid. That could have been my two sons, right? All of the kids in the neighborhood that we grew up with, right? And so the two of us began talking about it, and I realized that he was as angry as I was. A different kind of anger, right? He shared the anger in the loss of a child. He shared the anger in a not guilty plea, but he also had a different kind of anger that I think is necessary for you to speak about. And then what happened as time went on is Mike Brown happened. We all know Mike Brown, right? We all remember the Mike Brown story. So when the Mike Brown story happened, that's when we realized, oh man, and all the stories in between, right? Let's not forget that there are hundreds of stories in between that happened before Mike Brown. And when Mike Brown happened, the two of us sat down. Well, he came to me, actually, right? And he said, look, we need to do something. We need to write something, right? Because Mike Brown, y'all age. Trayvon, y'all age. This ain't about us, right? I'm in my 30s. It could happen to me. But who it's happening to most often? Kids.
That's right. Our
kids. And so I want you to talk a little about your indignation, about why you felt like this was necessary.
Yeah. So it was an honor and a privilege to go on tour together, to begin having these conversations, right? To begin having conversations about racism, to begin having conversations about the structures in place in our society that help reinforce this racism. And as I began following these news stories, last year in particular, it became really important to me to think about how do we. So we're artists. That's our bread and butter. That's our soul. We're artists. So we want to respond in some way, but how do we respond in a way that is honest about this, about the reality of the lives of so many people? And maybe the most honest way to do that would be to do something in partnership. Because I was boiling. I mean, when we met that first time to talk about it, I mean, it was like...
We were angry, yeah.
I mean, I don't want to pound the table because I don't want to spill water on you, but it was like table pounding angry, right? It's table pounding angry. But part of that anger isn't just that this happens. Part of that anger is that it's so unjust the imbalance in our society about who it happens to and who it doesn't happen to. So that makes me mad as a white person, right? Because I think about white privilege, and I think about how easy it is for me to look away, how easy it would be for me to say, not my problem, right? But it is my problem. And that's part of what my anger was about. It's about finding a way to say, how can we get more of the larger society across the country to say, yes, this is, in particular, also a white problem. White people have to own this. So I came into the project with that kind of anger, but not wanting to just, bang tables all day, because that's not going to do anything, right? So we want to create something productive, and so we wanted to create this book.
For sure. Let me ask y'all something. How many of y'all are artists in any way? All right, don't scream out what you do. What's your art? You draw? All right, what you got right here with the sweater on? What you do? You act and you draw, all right? What you right here, sister, what you got?
I act and I play the trumpet.
And you play the horn. I used to play the horn. That's what's up. What you got, brother?
I draw and I play trumpet.
You drawing right now? You supposed to be writing down questions. What you, get him out of here. No, I'm kidding. All right. What you got?
I draw and
And you play the piano. In the back, what you got? You work hard.
You work hard.
Boom. She like, drop the mic. She like, I work hard. Word up. What you got, sister? Right here. I see you, yeah. You act. Right here. You write poetry. Nobody, any of y'all, ain't no rappers in here? There's always a rapper in the room, man. You a rapper, you an MC? All right. Let me ask y'all this. Hold on. It's always the one dude who don't put his hand up got bars. Let me ask y'all this. Let me ask y'all this. Who are y'all listening to? Right? If you're a rapper, let's talk about it. And keep it 100 with me. So don't yell out, don't yell out, don't yell out, don't yell out. All right. Who you got? Who you listening to? Who you got? What'd he say? Oh, I don't even know. I gotta look it up. I don't even know. That's what's up. Who you got? Kendrick Lamar.
Kendrick
Drake.
Lamar.
What you got? Yeah. Drake. Who you got? Nobody? You like, I don't listen to music. Who you got? Who you got? I can't hear what you say. Chief Keef. Who you got? Big Flock? I don't know who that is. That's what's up. I'll look it up. You know what I mean? Yeah. Who is it? Oh, Shy Glizzy. He from DC, right? He did like awesome. That's awesome. His song, right? All right. What you got? Common. You like a old Common. My generation. You too young to know anything about Common. Common, an actor now. What you got? Fetty Wap, right? All right. So here's the question. Here's the question. Here's why that's important. Here's why that's important, right? Here's why that's important. So all y'all artists, everybody in here like, yo, I'm an actor, I'm a writer, I'm a poet. You know what I mean? I work hard. You know what I'm saying? Like, whatever your art is. The cats y'all threw out to me, right? Y'all got Fetty Wap, and I'm good with it. Fetty Wap, I mean, it's party music. You know what I mean? Y'all got Drake. Y'all got Shy Glizzy. Who is it? Lil Herb. They look. Y'all got Chief Keef, right? Who is this guy? Who is this?
I'm looking this up today.
I know. And they yelling at me like I'm supposed to know, and I'm like, I don't know. Like, all right. So here's the deal. Of everybody that we named, how many of them have songs about this? About police brutality. So, but you ain't named J. Cole. You named Kendrick. So we got Kendrick. And you named Common. So we got 10 names. Y'all got Keith, y'all got Shy Glizzy, y'all got Lil Herb, y'all got somebody named Swipey or something. Y'all got Jake. So look, so what that means? Hey, look, so what that means is, and look, don't get me wrong, it's okay, right? Party music is what's up. I'm with it, right? But it's important that we know that if you guys are going to be artists, and if your artists of today aren't doing their job in terms of talking about the things that are important, it's okay that they make party music because we need to party too. But somebody has to do the work, right? You work hard. My girl who's an artist says, I work hard. Well, look, we got to make sure that we work hard on what's necessary to work hard on. right? If we can party all day, if we can do What a Time to Be Alive, and like we can party on all those things, that's cool. Let's just make sure that as you guys grow into artists that you realize you have a responsibility. Because if nobody tells your story, then it doesn't exist. No one will ever know. No one can give it any value. So Brendan and I can write this book and give it to you in hopes that you read it and say, like, look, it's okay that Drake ain't talking about it. Kendrick is talking about it, right? But Billy Z ain't talking about it. Fat Trail ain't talking about it, right? Like whoever it is that y'all rock with, right? But at least there's something that exists. At least there's something that exists that's talking about it.
And this is an invitation for you, right? This book is also an invitation for you. This is an invitation for you to have these conversations. Start close. Make sure you're having those conversations with your friends. Ask your teachers to have these conversations. I think it's really important to think about this as a team effort, right? This book, I can't write this book by myself. I'd be an idiot if I thought I could do that for a lot of reasons, right? I can't do that. It's a team effort. It's a team effort for a reason. I think we would all do ourselves a favor if we took this invitation to create teams, right? So there's that old saying, right? Like a network is a net, right? It doesn't work if it's just one person. It's a net. You gotta build the network, right? We want this book to be a tool for you to begin to have real conversations, really honest conversations. Like, why does a white guy want to talk about this, right? We want to have these super honest conversations, and you got to start close and build out.
You had a question back there. You should take it. What's up, man?
How are we doing on time? Okay, let's shoot with a question. Yeah. So
the question was why are people defined by the color of their skin and not by why are people defined by the color of their skin? The truth is that people shouldn't be. Right? That's the truth, right? That's the issue. You know, that's the issue. The reality is that everybody in this room, we're all one. Everybody here talking about the same things. We're all in the same space, having the same experience, right? Having a good time. Everybody just want to go home, see their brothers and sisters, you know, talk to their mama, talk to their pops, have some dinner, you know what I mean? Whatever it is y'all do, you know what I mean? But everybody, whatever it is you do, everybody in here wants this. I mean, that's how it is. We got the same fears. We got the same struggles. We think the same things are funny most of the time. And so the issue is that people shouldn't feel like race is such a big deal. Unfortunately, historically, if I'm going to be completely honest with you, historically, this country was sort of predicated and built on that construct, right? The racial construct. I know you guys study it in school. I hope you study it in school in terms of, you know, slavery and all of these things. And it doesn't mean that it has to exist today or that it needs to exist today, but it still does. And while it does, we have work to do, you know?
I want to try to answer that question honestly, too, because I think it's important to, as Jason's talking about, like, it shouldn't be, and yet that happens. That is the case. And for us to pretend otherwise would be doing everybody a disservice. So to think about that historical construct that is at the root, we're talking about slavery, right? We're talking about this construct in our society, in our country, that is embedded in our history. It would be a lie, I think it'd be a lie to pretend like that doesn't affect our lives today. And so in our book, one of the things that we're trying to talk about is how that's connected, in fact. Why is it the case that Quinn, the white character, is thinking for the first time in his life that he's white, like what it means to be white? That's a strange thing, right? It's a strange thing for someone to say out loud in his world. But it would be a lie to say that it's not part of how our society works. So we have to be honest first, and then I think we work from there. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's a good question. What else? Let's start in the back, because we always get to the front.
All right, hard worker, let's hear it.
Collegiate Academy. This for Jason. When you sit down and start to write the book, did you get emotional, and how did you get over that emotional feeling?
Yeah, so good question. So when I sat down to write the book, I was. It's funny, right? Because at the time before I started writing it, I wasn't as emotional because I hadn't really thought about it, right? Like I thought about Trayvon, I thought about Mike Brown, like it was all sort of bubbling, but it was still sort of at a distance. And because we've gone through this so many times before you all were born, I had already gone through this a lot of times, right? And so at some point you start to, unfortunately, you start to shake it off a little quicker, which is really it's a terrible thing. It's like anybody, it's like people who've experienced death, right? If you experience a lot of death in your family and someone else dies, it hurts, but only for a moment, because then you're just like, yo, that's what happens, that's life, right? And so at the time, I wasn't really feeling any kind of way. But when I started to write it, and when I really started to think about what was going on, yo, it broke me down. It was terrible. It was terrible. And I started to think about things that we don't think about, right? So a prime example, social media, right? Now, here's the thing. I think social media is a powerful, powerful thing. It's what spawned sort of Black Lives Matter, and all these things that are happening now has come from like camera phones and posting it to social media sites. But what we never stop to think about in the midst of all of that is the family members of the people who've died. So if let's say you're Trayvon Martin's mother, or you're Trayvon Martin's little brother, and every time you go online, you see like 10,000 posts about what happened to your brother. Every time you turn the news on, you see the news people playing on loop what happened to your brother. Every time you're on Facebook or Twitter or Snapchat or whatever it is, you see there's hashtags with your brother's name on it. Millions of people, the constant sort of reminder of what has happened to your loved one. So I was thinking about like the family members too. Like, what does Mike Brown's mom feel knowing for a fact that every single time she gets on the internet, her son's picture, his footage, the footage of his murder, his dead body in the street, is played over and over and over and over again. Like, what does that feel like? And those things sort of broke me down, and those things sort of made me feel some kind of way. So, good question. Thank you.
All right, wait. I got one more question.
Yeah, she like,
Check this out while you.
All right, I said,
And
who
how'd
do
I
you
get-
look? Who do you look up to and why?
who do I look up? You. I look up to you, homie. You work. Hey, look, you said you work hard. That's all I'm looking for. That's all I ever wanted to do was be a hard worker. Everything I got in life, I got from hard work, right? So I'm looking at you. I'm looking at all of y'all. Listen, everybody outside these rooms, in case y'all didn't know, looking at y'all crazy. People always say, I talk to elders and older people all the time. They're like, look, I don't know about this generation. I don't know. But I talk to you guys face to face every day. And what I know is y'all are the most brilliant kids to ever live. Y'all doing big things, but y'all have to know that in order for it to matter. So I'm looking up to y'all, which means y'all got to not let me down. Feel me? All right.
Let's get a couple more here, and then we'll go to the cards. Yeah.
Why did you name the book All American Boys? Because it's not just only boys getting killed.
Good question.
That's a great question. So Jason Rightly had the first. He wrote the first email back to our editor when we were talking about this title to say this is not just a problem that boys suffer. This is a problem that girls suffer as well. It is true that in the book, if you read into the story and begin to see who are the people who are involved in the protests, you'll see that girls are involved as well, and you'll see that there's some conversation about that in the book. But I think your question is a really great question, because this idea of all American boys, has anyone ever heard that term before? Like an all American boy? Yeah. It's like a cowboy, right? Right? That image of a cow. So somehow there's that association in our mind. An all-American boy is a cowboy, right? So I guess in my mind, teaching in New York City, teaching in classes where there are people whose first languages, there are over 180 different languages, right? People from all over the world are in these schools where I was teaching in New York City, right? And I'm thinking, these are all American boys and girls, right? So there's a real issue out there in the world if we think immediately of that cowboy, right? Because believe me, I do too. I'm right with you. That was my first instinct. But we want to make sure that everyone's talking about why is that our instinct? That's why we have All American Boys as the title, right? Because we want to open that up. It should include all of us. It's a term that shouldn't just be that first association. So that's an awesome question. We have some others on the cards as well. I want to do justice to some of the folks who wrote cards, because when you're in class, the people who are the loudest always get to get their answers first. So let's go to the people who actually wrote some questions down. And one of the questions that I saw in the deck was about the two of us and writing and when we started. So I just want to address some of the birth of art kind of questions. I will be honest with you. When I was in high school, I had a high school teacher tell me that I wasn't so great. I'm not kidding. That I was not so great at writing. It was something that I loved. I believe it or not, I actually liked quite a bit of hip hop too when I was in middle school, and that was my intro into poetry. And then I learned a lot more about poetry, and I was moving forward, and I said, look, I want to do some creative work. My high school teacher said, no, you're not so great. That was a real push for me, because I cared about it. So I started writing, and I started writing, and I started writing, and I failed, and I failed, and I failed, and I failed. And I can't tell you how empowering that was for me to keep at it.
I have a similar story though. So here's the thing, right? So people always ask, like, when did you start? Why do you write? Were you writing your whole life? Were you reading a bunch of books? I didn't read any books until I was 17. Zero, no novels, no. Like, you guys have already read books. I read no books until I was 17, because back in the 80s and 90s, All American Boys didn't exist. Those books, it just wasn't happening, right? We had Walter D. Myers, thankfully. Did any of y'all know Walter D. Myers? Has anyone ever heard of Walter D. Myers? The great Walter D. Myers. So we had Walter D. Myers, right? So if you were a kid growing up sort of in a black neighborhood or with black family and that kind of thing, he was pretty much one of the only ones representing for the younger people, telling their stories for the most part. And so I went all through school without ever reading anything. We were, with Lord of the Flies, To Kill a Mockingbird, Mice and Men. I just was like, yo, I'm not reading it. I'm not doing any of that. Like, just give me a C, let me move on. I'm not doing it. So what saved me was the same thing. It was Queen Latifah. Queen Latifah, because back in the day, before Queen Latifah was an actress and a model and a TV show host and all this, that, and the third, Queen Latifah was a rapper. I don't know if y'all knew that, but all right. Queen Latifah, not only was she a rapper, she was like one of the best rappers around. So all you young ladies, it don't matter. Like, if you got bars, you got bars, right? Latifah was amazing. And so I remember going to the store and buying Queen Latifah's album and taking the plastic. It was a cassette tape. Y'all know what cassette tapes? All right. I was just trying to make sure. What's a cassette tape? Them little tapes. Yeah. That's where mixtape.
Ancient history.
Y'all be talking about, a mixtape came out. Like, that was what a mixtape actually was. Like, there ain't no such thing as a mixtape no more, because tapes don't exist anymore. But that's what a mixtape was, right? That's where they come from. Like actual tapes, you had to, like, we call them pause tapes. You had to sit at the radio and hit record and, like, which ask your parents about it. You know what I mean? So Queen Latifah had this album come out called Black Rain. And I bought this record, and this is the one with U-N-I-T-Y. Y'all know that song? U-N-I-T-Y. It's party, right? All right, so I bought the album. I take the plastic off, and back then, every single album you bought came with these things called liner notes. And I know y'all don't know what no liner notes are. But what they were basically pamphlets that came in every single cassette tape. A little teeny pamphlet was this big, but you could unfold it, and it was like this long, right? So you unfold it, and what was printed on the pamphlet were the lyrics to every single song. Right. I wish, how they had that when don't nothing come in, ain't nothing on paper no more. It come with the album, you can tap the album. You gotta download it. Who gonna do that? Y'all download liner notes? No. You know what I mean? So right, and if y'all did download liner notes and read the lyrics, most of y'all they lose a lot of fans, because nobody know what Future talking about. And if y'all could read it, y'all be like, I don't know what he's saying. He's saying nothing. He's mumbling. And we paying my man for him to mumble. But anyway, so look, so I got Queen Latifah's album. I listened to the whole record, right, the whole album, and then I listened to it again, but this time I was reading along with the lyrics. And then the third time, I just read the lyrics by themselves. I was like 10 years old, and it was the first time that I realized, like, oh man, all this stuff they teaching me in school about, like, Langston Hughes and these people, Queen Latifah was doing sort of the same thing, except it was connecting with me. And we had Pac, right? Pac was a poet, right? We had Slick Rick. Slick Rick was a poet, right? We had Rakim, we had Kumo D, we had KRS-One, we had all these people, and we had early Jay-Z back in Nas. These people considered themselves poets. And so studying hip-hop for the course of like my childhood and all the way up through college is what got me into writing, because all I wanted to do is tell stories about what it was like to be me, and would tell stories about my family and my friends and my community, because that's what the rappers were doing. And then eventually I discovered Richard Wright and changed my life, and that was it.
Just one more from the cards, because there are a number of questions that are similar. So just to address a couple more of these. And I'm just going to read a couple of these out loud, because you wrote them. And when I used to teach, when I handed papers back, I used to like to read aloud lines from the papers that students had written, just to say, look, we're reading this aloud just like we're reading our books aloud, because you guys have done some great work. And so I appreciate just some of these questions quite a bit. Here's a series of questions in a row that I think are all related. How does police brutality affect how you act when you walk around outside, and how does it affect how you feel about being put in your own skin? How does police brutality affect those around you, and how does it affect your friends? How does your personal view of police brutality affect your relationships with your friends who thought differently? And that's a question that I really, really appreciate quite a bit. This idea of how I might feel about this, right? About how I feel about police brutality. I don't want to pretend that I am someone who is also a victim. I want to instead ask the question, what can I do to help stop this? What's my role in this conversation? And I think it's inspiring to think back to all the marches of last year, right? I think it's inspiring to think about how this was not a series of marches that were started by politicians, right? These are things that grew out of people who lived in the neighborhoods where this was all happening. And so my role, I feel like, is to support those who begin some of these movements, to help try to inspire some of this protest, to help inspire some of this antagonism, and to join people when they get out there. And to make sure that when I'm walking down the street and I see something going on, like maybe, for example, I see something happening down the road and it's not necessarily a friend of mine, but I might just make sure that I don't turn this time. That maybe I stay and watch. Maybe I pull out my phone. Maybe I recognize that I am not a bystander. You've heard that phrase, right? Don't be a bystander, be an upstander, right? As corny as that sounds, I believe that is so true. And so I appreciate these questions, because I think it's important for us all to recognize what we can do in different situations. My role, because of that awful story that I told, right, is that I might have that privilege to stand in the street and help make sure that others see what's going on. And so I encourage people to use power when they have it in the right way.
And for me, the question of what it feels like, honest answer, it feels normal. And that's a problem. It feels normal for me. It feels normal for a lot of us, I think. And so what I'm tasking you all to do is to let your voices be heard. Be aware, right? This isn't about you hating police officers, because all cops aren't bad cops. That's the truth, right? That's not what we're telling you. That's ridiculous. That's not all cops are bad. There are good cops. Some of you have called cops and they've come and helped you, right? What I'm saying is just be aware that these things are happening. If you are growing up and want to be a police officer, be a good cop, right? You have an opportunity to change things too. Right? There's hope in you. We're looking at you like, oh, you guys can be the future. You guys can help. Make your voices heard. Let your voices heard. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't feel ashamed. Don't feel the need to have to walk a different way. Be who you are, and push for a better day. Push for something more. Have these conversations. Talk to police officers. officers when they're not sort of doing the thing, when they're not sort of working in action. Walk up to a cop and ask them questions, some fair questions. Have some discourse, especially in your communities. If you got beat cops in your neighborhood, right, which are the cops who patrol the street, just hanging out on your blocks and stuff, they in your neighborhood. Say what's up. How you doing? Right? Create relationships is what we need. How much time do we have? I want to make sure.
Why don't we take two more
We'll take
questions,
two more.
maybe one in the audience and
Great.
one
Perfect. It's your call, man.
All right.
You be the bad guy.
Yeah, exactly. Who has not yet had a chance to? We got this kid right over here in the glasses, right over here.
And the Redskins join. But we ain't doing that well, but I'm with you.
What inspired you to buy Queen Latifah's album?
What inspired me to buy Queen Latifah's album? Yo, it's hard to explain it because at the time, everybody was buying Queen Latifah. It's the same thing that inspires all of y'all to buy Drake, right? She was Drake of her time. She was a big deal, man. And she was saying things about the neighborhoods. So like what she was saying was literally like, look, this is how we living around here. This is what's going on. She was telling boys to respect girls, right? In a time where, you know, no one was saying it like that, right? Because we had Salt and Pepper out at the same time, and they were doing the same thing, but in a different way. Latifah was like, look, I'm big enough and I'm bad enough to beat you, so you're not about to come at me like that. That was her whole thing. And for some reason, and I don't know if it's because I have a sister, and like for some reason I was really attracted to like her message and what she was saying, and she was just a beast with it. She was so good. And so that's why Latifah, yeah.
Let's sneak in one more over there in the coat. Yeah.
Did the book ever make an impact on your daily lives?
Did this book?
Yeah.
Man, we right here. This is an impact on our daily life. And as of today, this is the impact, you know?
Yeah. No, you know why I appreciate that is because I feel really lucky that I get to do something I care about. And I spent a lot of time doing things that I didn't kind of really care about. And so I got this opportunity. So yes, this book has made that impact, but also I think the book makes an impact because, you know, we stand on stage and we talk as if we're experts of some kind or another. And I want to be clear that I don't feel like I'm an expert. My role and why I feel really lucky to be a part of this project is just to get out there and do something, right? I don't want to make a claim that I'm an expert. So the book makes an impact on my life every day because I want to learn a little bit more every day.
Same here.
All right.
Okay, thank you guys.
Sorry, y'all. Good luck.
Thank you so much, Jason and Brendan.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.